From a Sasquatch stalking the edge of a homestead to horrifying discoveries deep in the woods, these are some of the clearest and most compelling pieces of footage ever recorded. Up first is the Provo Canyon encounter. This terrifying encounter begins with a couple hiking in the renowned Bigfoot hotspot of Provo Canyon. While they may not have been looking for a Sasquatch, they certainly find one. The couple spots the creature watching them from a concealed position before it then rises to its full height in what seems to be a threat. The hikers may not speak Sasquatch, but they do speak survival instinct, and they make a break for it the moment the creature begins to reach its full height. Since then, there have been several other sightings in Provo Canyon, including of a Sasquatch throwing rocks at another hiker. Next is Port Renfrew. Vancouver Island has many lush areas of wilderness, including around Port Renfrew, which seems to be one of the last locations of a Sasquatch population on the island. This hiker ended up coming across a very, very hairy situation, if you'll pardon my pun. There, just a dozen meters away, is a creature capable of tearing a tree apart with its bare hands, a creature that is known to hunger for meat. The Sasquatch doesn't seem to notice the hiker and instead is focused on harvesting something from a tree in front of it. Whether that's foliage or sap or grubs, we don't exactly know. Thankfully, this hiker was lucky enough to be able to retrace their steps and escape both without alerting the creature or being injured. Now, for a homesteading horror. Our homes are meant to be our safe spaces, but for homes out in the rural wilderness, there are dangers that can turn your entire homestead into a living horror. This family had been making strange sightings in the distance for some time, but it was after several weeks of unnerving sightings that they finally spotted the creature for sure. The large Sasquatch is seen watching from the edge of the clearing and is no doubt an intimidating sight. After the sighting, the family decided to take more proactive measures to protect themselves and began using fireworks and other loud bangs to ward off the creature, which has seemingly worked as they've made no sightings since. Now for the famed Claimans Dome. The highest point in Tennessee is likely also one of the most southern points where Sasquatch can be seen. Sasquatch, being the North American species, tend to live in cool environments, their thick fur making life in warmer areas difficult except for set species. And so, in the southern reaches of their range, they often stay restricted to the mountains, where cold air and isolation gives them the best environment to live in. This footage was recorded by some hikers who stopped when they saw a whole crowd of people watching this tree line. The people had said they saw something like a bear walking on two legs, after which some of this stunning footage was captured. The eastern Sasquatch populations are considered to be under extreme threat as habitat loss and warming are putting a greater strain on these creatures to survive. Little else is known of the eastern population, as sightings of the western or midwest populations are simply far more common. Next up are forested remains. A group of hunters near the Banff National Park came across a horrifying encounter with a large Sasquatch nest adorned with the remains of unknown creatures, some of which could have been human. Instead of, I don't know, alerting the authorities, they decide to set up a trail cam watching over the nest, which does end up picking up some pretty incredible footage. We watch as the creature returns to its nest, and yet it can clearly sense something is wrong. It's likely Sasquatch do not have as good vision as us, but what they do have is a significantly better sense of smell. The Sasquatch ends up sniffing out the camera and rips it from the tree. However, the camera was recoverable the next day when the hunters returned for it. And finally, Marble Mountain. This footage was recorded by a leader of a youth group called Campus Life who made a yearly trip out to Marble Mountain. However, in 2001, something special would happen. First, the group would discover a strange shelter constructed in the forest, made of thick pine boughs and branches stacked to create a hovel large enough to fit 2 people or a single Sasquatch. But that wasn't the exciting part. Anyone could have made that shelter. The exciting part comes just a few minutes later when a student calls out that they see something up on the ridge. Way far off in the distance, walking along the ridge of Marble Mountain is some sort of giant bipedal creature. It's easily above the 8-foot mark, judging by the trees that it passes. However, unlike other sightings, this footage actually lasts for quite a long time. It watches the creature cross over the ridge and behind a rock outcropping. This has been considered by many to be among the most definitive pieces of proof available. Others, however, have claimed it's just someone wearing a big coat stumbling over a mountain ridge. What do you think? Up first, the spark to the flame. Sightings have been reported for centuries, but this was the first one to be caught on film and started all the Bigfoot hype way back in 1967. Recorded by filmmakers Rogers Patterson and Gimlin, they had been riding their horses down a Californian trail in the Buff Creek area searching for Bigfoot after reports of recent sightings when they had to dismount to cross over a fallen log. It was lucky that they had, because just as they were crossing, the very creature they were after creature began to cross in the far clearing. They did manage to set up the camera in time, and though it is initially shaky, they do capture several critical clear seconds. The footage even has a fairly decent resolution of the creature's head and fur, which seems very intriguing and possibly believable. Since then, many have tried to smear and discredit Patterson and Gimlin, but they continue to attest to the truth of the sighting. Next is the swamp monster. Josh Highcliffe was a hunter with a chunk of property 9 miles west of Tunica. On this fateful morning, however, Josh decided that he would be hunting hogs, and so got out into the swamp early that morning. Well before sunrise, he settled in and waited for the pigs to arrive, but it was a few hours later when he heard a shuffling sound and began to prepare to take a pig home. Instead, he would see a massive Sasquatch focused on an old dead cypress tree in the swamp. Immediately, Josh started recording and captured some of the most chilling footage I've ever seen. We truly get to see and hear the incredible strength of this creature as it appears to simply rip this tree trunk to shreds with its bare hands. Highcliffe ran the moment that he could and has allegedly not been back in the forest since. If it weren't for his posting on his own YouTube channel, which has no other videos, this footage likely would have never seen the light of day. Next is the Lettuce Lake legend. Matt initially thought this creature that he spotted while canoeing was a bear. However, after reviewing this footage with the park ranger, they determined that this couldn't be a bear. According to the park ranger, few bears, if any, ever went into the swamp. The creature was seen striding, swimming, and diving through the water, and did not seem to notice Matt at first. He has reason to believe that it also isn't a human, as what human would go diving in a fursuit in swamp water filled with 12-foot gators and water moccasins? Eventually, the creature does seem to notice Mark watching it and flees to deeper water before swimming away entirely. Could semi-aquatic swamp apes actually be real? No one expects to be watched by a Sasquatch while they work, but for this oil field worker, that's exactly what happened. He pulled up to a pipeline in the dead of winter to go through some simple diagnostic checks, and everything seems to be fine. He does his checks, gets back in his truck, and drives off. But that's when we see it. A massive 9-foot tall Sasquatch watching him from the trees. The creature has obviously been there for some time, as it's almost covered in fallen snow, and it's likely been keeping watch over a nearby family, protecting them from this oil worker. It's chilling to think that this worker could have been mere meters from a certain end, but thankfully he avoided a grisly fate. He has since apparently suffered harassment from an unknown figure who wants him to take down this footage. Next is the Nightwalker. This footage came from western Montana, released by a family that lives in a home on the edge of the woods. On this night, the family heard horrific screeches and screams coming from the forest, along with loud thumps, bangs, and so the father grabs a camera and, perhaps unwisely thinking he's the main character, goes out into the trees. He finds a shattered tree that seems to have been smashed to pieces with a rock. While continuing to move deeper into the woods, he then comes across it. Suddenly, and without warning, a massive Sasquatch appears briefly and peers out of the forest at the camera. This is paralyzing footage and is deeply unsettling. It's clear, given the distances involved, that this Sasquatch could easily charge across this short clearing and tear this man limb from limb, and yet it doesn't. It simply stares, grunts, blinks, and then vanishes back into the woods just as quickly as it appeared.